guys, it's Jasper, and today I wanted to talk about my trip to Scotland. So if you've been following me on Instagram, you know that I got to spend 2 weeks in Scotland, which was really exciting because I have spent the last 8 years or so focusing my research on fairy tales and mythology, the last 6 years focusing on Celtic myth and fairy tales, and the last 2 years specifically on Scotland. And so this trip has been something long time coming. I wouldn't have known, 4 or 5 years ago that a trip to Scotland would be where I would be going. My focus was always a little bit more in Ireland than it was in Scotland when it came to the my Celtic sources. But the last 2 years, my focus has sort of shifted, and I just got my eyes set on Scotland. The more I read about it, the more I thought I need to go there. I need to see this place. And it also probably didn't help too much that I also started watching Outlander, and now I'm a fangirl. I'm a hashtag fangirl, shameless. Just focusing, just the way that my research has been going, and then the fact that I started watching Outlander, it just more and more, undoubtedly the last 2 years have just been like Scotland focused and really dreaming about when I can see all of these things that I've been reading and focusing about. So the trip was largely planned around firstly, like an academic, on an academic basis. There's so many things that I've been reading about and researching the last few years, and so academia was my first sort of pull, and where am I going to go and what do I want to see. The second thing that was sort of a pull to decide what I wanted to see was my writing. This is the first year that I have been able to give my writing full attention, and it's been mostly since just sort of the end of the spring. I was able to start focusing on my writing, and this fall in particular is the first fall that I have where I'm not doing my writing plus something else. It's always been plus school usually, and this is the first time I could focus just on my writing. And so I really wanted to use this trip as well to find places that would really inspire the landscape for the world that I'm writing and working on, because it's a fantasy story and there's some pretty epic traveling. And so I wanted to, hike places that would be similar to what my main character might have to go through, to feel what it's like, to slip on rocks and scuff up your elbows and get caught in the rain and feel wind push you over. This happened to me. I was hiking and the wind pushed me right over. So my writing was another big influencer. And then the third thing, like I said, I could not help myself. I had to fangirl and find Outlander spots, which incidentally were really great inspiration for my story as well. All in all, I spent 5 nights in Edinburgh, and from Edinburgh I did various day trips. I should say this, my husband and I went together, which was really awesome, because it's one thing to travel and it's a whole nother thing to have somebody to travel with. And so we rented a car and drove all around. So we stayed in Edinburgh for 5 nights and did day trips from there. A lot going north of Edinburgh and northeast in Scotland. Then we did 3 nights in Dalmally, which is close to Glencoe, and did a lot of hiking and that sort of thing. And then we did 4 nights up in Isle of Skye, over the sea to Skye, and did a lot of hiking and sightseeing up there. And then we had one last day we called our Wander Day, where we drove up further north to Inverness and Culloden, and then back down through, there's a huge national park, I'm trying to think, on the northeast side, just really close to where the Edinburgh airport was, and stayed there one night. This was our cute little flat in Edinburgh. Our first day was spent just getting off the plane, getting our car rental, and then settling into the apartment. The next day we drove out to Linton Palace, then the village of Culross, to West Kirk, and then the village of Falkland. One of the things that was really neat about visiting Linlithgow Palace was that from the outside it didn't look like anything too special. But once you're on the inside, just wandering the palace was so neat because it really gave you a sense of what it might have felt like to live in the castle. And there was a certain sense of regality as you wandered around. So it was really neat. I found myself imagining myself sort of in the position of a character in particular in my book who is in a position of nobility but is then pushed from her own kingdom and sort of reestablished somewhere else against her will. And so it was fun wandering around and pretending I was her and that these were my great sort of hallowed halls. I also, of course, had to have some fun and fangirl a bit, so there's a part coming up in which I do a little singing. Sing me a song of a loss that is gone, sacred that was behind. Now it should be noted that the little girl voice you hear at the end who says hello, hello, was another hashtag fangirl, of course from another fan kingdom. She was of the Frozen home base and was running around the palace singing, what song was it? Oh, Let It Go, I think. And this was her ice palace, so I thought that was pretty cute. We were just two fangirls from two different fan universes singing our little songs. Now, Culross was a really neat village to visit, simply for the reason that it has such an old world feeling about it. I had been tipped off that it's a great Outlander spot, that they did some filming. I think the witch trials were filmed here. But one of the main reasons why we came here was to visit the old Kirk, which was quite the journey to find. There's like a few signs, but you sort of meander and wander through a field until you come across a wall with a cemetery and the remains of the old Kirk. Of the things we saw, the old Kirk to me was just, and I'm saying old Kirk and I realized it's West Kirk. Craziness. The West Kirk was just so beautiful, and it's a spot where I could have spent all day just sitting and thinking and writing. There's something so enchanting about a place made of stone that's been broken up and it's got all this light pouring in it and covered in ivy and leaves. It was sort of a secret garden spot, and I found it was really difficult to leave. I sort of wished it could have been something in my backyard that, or a local park where I could come and visit it every day. Now, the village of Falkland was a place we had to visit simply for the reason that this is where they filmed Inverness for Outlander. It's a village that's older looking, and so this is why they used it, but this is where they had the inn that they stay at, where Claire looks in the window and sees the vase, where Jamie's ghost looks up at Claire, and it was so much fun to come here, and I literally just ran around the city centre, this small little circle around the fountain, and I just fangirled. I was like, Dad, look at this, look at this, look at this, and I just was running around not knowing what to do with myself. The next day we went to Doune Castle, Blackness Castle, and best of all, we went to Midhope Castle, which is Lallybroch. So when we visited Doune Castle, which is the filming location for Castle Leoch in Outlander, I was surprised at how much my fangirl came out. I was kind of like, it's cool, it's just a castle, it'll be neat for the history, but as soon as I saw it, I just started squealing, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm exactly like Claire, and I've fallen through time, and I'm at Castle Leoch. So it was so much fun, and it was a beautiful castle to go and see. of course, I did some fangirling, and it's embarrassing, so here you go. As much as my rational mind tried to deny it, I could no longer deny I was no longer in the 20th century. I've fallen through time. When I was initially planning the trip, I wasn't sure if Blackness Castle was one of the places I wanted to see, because the only reason that I had sort of heard about it was because of Outlander, and this is supposed to be Wentworth Prison. And I just sort of thought, why would I want to visit the place where Jamie is flogged and all sorts of really bad stuff happens? But I'm really happy that we did come to see it, because there was something about seeing this prison that was right on the water. It was wild, and certainly in terms of story, it gives you piles and piles of inspiration. It is a place that I wish could have had a happier vibe, because right on the water it was breathtaking, but wandering the halls and knowing that it was a prison, although it was used most often as kind of an upscale prison, the rooms were usually quite comfortable, and then at one point it was the garrison for military post, and then it was a little less comfortable, but it was neat to come and visit, and yeah, overall I'm really happy. I also had the unique opportunity of running into Outlander fangirls, which was so much fun. I could hear them squealing and screaming around the corner, like, oh my gosh, this is where Jamie was, and I'm gonna take a picture and compare it when I get home to the episode. I know this is exactly where Jamie was. So it was really interesting when, fangirls meet historical places. Now, the best thing about this day, of course, was going to see Lallybroch. I said earlier that when we visited Castle Doune, the site for Castle Lallybroch, I realized, how much of a fangirl I was, and I was surprised at how it came out. I was not prepared for how much it would come out when we pulled up to Lallybroch, and I could see Lallybroch, and I was like, Dan, it's Lallybroch. And, wistfully sighing, like, take me home to Lallybroch. And my husband, who hasn't, read the series and watched the films, but has heard enough from me, was just like, I don't understand. What is this place? It's just a farm, right? What is the significance of all the things we've seen, the castles and beautiful sights? This is just a house. And so he didn't understand it, but he was very patient as I sat on the steps and read a little bit of Outlander, and I leaned against the wall and for the gate. And of course he posed with me to take some cute shots, and then also took this picture of me being just the world's weirdest fangirl. I found some daisies growing, and daisies are my favorite flowers, so I picked one and put it in my copy of Outlander to press it. The next day was our Whisky and Castle day. So we had about a 4-hour drive north from our Edinburgh flat up to the Macallan estate, where we did a whiskey tour and got to sample some yummy scotches. After that, we drove a bit to the Glenfiddich distillery for lunch, where I must tell you that they had in the women's washroom a deer antler chandelier, a great big fireplace. It was the fanciest washroom I think I have ever seen. It was just really strange and wonderful. Part of the fun of this day was the drive around. We drove past quite a few distilleries, because that part of Scotland that we were in, the northeastern part, is the Spy region, and it's where you've got tons and tons and tons of distilleries. So we drove past a lot of distilleries, but just the scenery in northeastern Scotland was incredible. There was all these adorable scenic bridges, and of course we saw lots of castles as we passed by. There was 2 castles in particular that we stopped for, and they couldn't have been just more different than each other, and they were so perfect to see together in the same day because they were such a contrast. The first castle was Craiglavere Castle, which I'm probably saying wrong, and it was a pink castle. The inspiration, actually, that Disney used for their 1950 cartoon Cinderella, and it was so adorable. I found I couldn't help but sing the "A Dream is a Wish Your Heart Makes" song. Faith in your dreams. It was just absolutely enchanting. Your dreams come shining through. The next castle we went to visit, which I mentioned was in sharp contrast to this one, was Doune Castle. Now, we went knowing we were going after hours and wouldn't be able to get into the castle. It was sort of just a timing thing, and we kind of traded off. We said, well, it'll be worth it just to see the outside. And I have to say, of all the castles we saw, this one was perhaps the best because of its location, its setting, and it was absolutely worth seeing just the outside. You know, of the castles that we saw the inside of, I would trade that experience just to see the outside of Doune Castle again, because it has all these sharp cliffs that seem impossible for a castle to be built on such a spot. And what was really neat was when we were at the Pink Castle, the weather was, although there were some low clouds, it was fairly sunny and bright feeling, but as soon as we got to Doune Castle, it started to rain just lightly, and the clouds got heavier, and the wind picked up a bit, and you could hear birds, you know, coming, and blackbirds coming to land on the castle. That was absolutely haunting. It was incredible and beautiful, and something like out of a fairy tale, but unlike the Pink Castle, would certainly be more a place for the villain to live. I did a lot of good writing here. The next day was my birthday, and it was also our last day in Edinburgh. So we started off at the Elephant House, where J.K. Rowling wrote Harry Potter, and we had a yummy, yummy birthday breakfast. My husband read some folk tales to me while I sipped a cappuccino, and it was perfection. It was also really sweet going again into the bathrooms. I'm just thinking, Glenfiddich, I talked about the bathrooms, but at the Elephant House, in the bathrooms, which are covered in graffiti, and a lot of it is just thank you notes to J.K. Rowling for creating this world that she did, and how important and valuable it was and life-changing it was for so many people. So that was really neat. After that, we went to the Edinburgh Castle, meandered around and enjoyed the history and the art and all of the things that it had to offer. I have to say, although it is a large castle and a wonderful castle, of the castles we saw, it wasn't one of the best, and I think a large part of that had to do with the fact that there were so many tourists, and it's more of a museum than it is, you know, like when we visited Castle Doune and it's the rough castle. The Edinburgh Castle is a little bit more cleaned up and laid out like a museum. After that, we meandered Edinburgh. I purposely set up our schedule in a way that we didn't have to do more than we wanted to. All we had to do that day was celebrate my birthday and go to the Edinburgh Castle. So we meandered and went shopping and mostly spent the day eating all of the food we could find.